Hello everybody, welcome to our midweek thought for the week. This week we're going to be looking at another lady in the Bible, and her name is Herodias. Now you might not have heard of her or thought very much about her, but her story comes in in various Gospels, but I'm going to read now from Mark chapter 6 beginning at verse 14. Herod hearing about Jesus, this begins with: King Herod heard of it, for Jesus' name had become known. Some were saying John the Baptizer had been raised from the dead, and for this reason these powers are at work in him. But others said it is Elijah, and others said it is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard of it, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. For Herod himself had sent men who had arrested John, bound him, and put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because Herod had married her. For John had been telling Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. And Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to kill him, but she could not. For Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he protected him. When he heard him, he was greatly perplexed, yet he liked to listen to him. But an opportunity came when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his courtiers and officers and for the leaders of Galilee. When his daughter Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, Ask for whatever you wish, and I will give it. And he solemnly swore to her, Whatever you ask me, I will give you, even half of my kingdom. So she went out and said to her mother, What should I ask for? And her mother replied, The head of John the Baptizer. Immediately she rushed back to the king and requested, I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter. The king was deeply grieved, yet out of regard for his oaths and for the guests, he did not want to refuse her. Immediately the king sent a soldier of the guard with orders to bring John's head. He went and beheaded him in the prison, brought his head on a platter, and gave it to the girl. The girl gave it to her mother. When his disciples heard about it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. So that's the story of what happened to John the Baptist with Herod and Herodias, and another Herodias, the daughter, sometimes called Salome. And so it was kind of really very difficult to think about this woman, but this woman intrigues me, and I'm going to tell you a bit about why, and we can have a think about that. So this family, the Herods, remind me of that poem, which I thought until I just double checked it was by Spike Milligan, but it's actually a Dr. Seuss poem. So if you've heard my sermon on Wednesday or Thursday this week, I am sorry, this is not Spike Milligan, it is Dr. Seuss. And it begins, Mrs. McCabe had 23 sons and she called them all Dave. So all the people in the Herod family were called Herod. Boys, Herod; girls, Herodias. Some of them had extra names as well. So there was the Herod the king, around about when Jesus was born. He was a violent man, even in the eyes of the Romans. One of the problems with the Herod dynasty is that they ruled over all the Jewish people, but they weren't really Jews. They were kind of pretending to be Jews or working extra hard at being converted to Jews. And Herod the Great actually had 2 of his sons killed. And this led the Roman Emperor Augustus to say it's safer to be Herod's pig than his sons. It's safer to be Herod's pig than his sons, because of course Herod would never have dared to kill a pig, but he did have his 2 sons killed. So very difficult family situation. So Herodias, the mother, finds herself in this horrendous situation. So she's been married to one of the Herod dynasty, and I'm not exactly sure how they were related. I don't think they were half brother and half sister, but I mean they were related. And then she finds herself, about the time that John the Baptist is saying that this is very wrong, Herodias finds herself married to this Herod king, who's the king, and they're part of this very, very violent dynasty. And she is very, very vulnerable. Herodias is in a really, really vulnerable position. We don't have to look very far back in our own history, certainly not back 2,000 years, to find kings who actually treated their wives very badly, and when they wanted to get rid of their wives, essentially they just had them killed. So Herodias is in this situation where she's married to a man in a very, very violent dynasty, and then John the Baptist comes along and says, you shouldn't be married to him. And Herod starts to listen. Herod is listening to John the Baptist saying, you shouldn't be married to Herodias, and Herodias is terrified. Herodias is terrified. She finds herself in a really, really difficult position. A few years ago, when I was doing my sabbatical, I interviewed various people, and one of the people that I interviewed was a female banker. And I was really thinking about banking and access to money and the lack of trust and all these sorts of things. And I said to her, the question I asked her was, do you think banks would be perceived as more trustworthy, and perhaps would be more trustworthy if they were run by women? And she said, no, I don't actually think that would make any difference at all. I think that the issue is that the women would end up having to make the same difficult decisions that the men had to make, and it wouldn't be any different at all. And Herodias finds herself in this terrible position where she makes a decision at the point that she's able to get rid of John the Baptist, because John the Baptist is very, very dangerous to her daughter, and to her position in the family. She is literally in a life and death situation, and she chooses that John will be the sacrifice that will be made. Why am I talking about Herodias? Why am I so intrigued by her? The older I get, I think I find more and more women who make poor choices in situations where they are frightened. They are trying to do either the best thing or the only thing that they think that they can do, which will preserve their life. And sometimes we might perceive those choices as really bad choices. This is a very violent story. Herodias makes a very violent choice, and that kind of upsets us a bit. Meek or mild woman, a terrified woman, a woman in an impossible situation who makes an impossible choice. And that's recorded for us even now. So I guess what I've been trying to edge towards as I've been preaching this sermon today, or this week, about Herodias, is that we need to be conscious that often we don't understand all of the story, and often someone's story is more terrible and more difficult than we know or imagine, and that even in those situations people make choices that they feel forced into, or a difficult choice, a wrong choice, and it's because of their situation, and that we need to have a level of compassion and empathy with people who make bad choices, or choices where they feel that they were really pushed into a corner. So today, Herodias, a kind of anti-heroine for today, but so a woman who is in a hard place, who made a hard choice, and there are lots of women like that today. And we need to think, before we judge people, we need to remember the position where they come from. So that's this week. There'll be Sunday thought for the day on Sunday. Churches are open again for worship. Please look at the notice boards to find out when they're open and what's going on. Okay, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.